Stillwater's Morning Scramble, and the mayor's in. Well, Joyce, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve.
I asked what we're going to talk about. Obviously, we know where we're going to tap into, but you asked me about the Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, and I saw the ninth episode. I have one episode left, and your family is watching it. Are you watching it as a whole family?
No. So my kids have watched a couple of them, but I watched the last two last night with my father-in-law.
Well, that's awesome.
And brother-in-law, and we actually some friends of ours had sent us some frozen Chicago deep dish pizza from Lou Malnati's.
So you were all in.
So we took a frozen deep dish pizza over there and ate Chicago pizza and watched the last couple episodes of it. So it was fun.
Don't you think it's a great human study also?
It really is. It's fascinating, especially on Jordan himself. I mean, he's clearly, in some of those interviews, you can tell he's fairly conflicted about the fact that his competitive drive, has led to, not great consequences sometimes for him. But he also wouldn't change it, right? I mean, he knows that it's an issue, but he also says, I mean, this is the only way for me.
But I think as spectators and fans, and we both played sports, but I wasn't gifted with that kind of athleticism. Hardly anybody is. Right?
No.
But there's a tendency to almost say, well, it'd be nice, and just assume it came to them, as opposed to, now obviously they were blessed, no doubt about that, with size and grace and all this stuff. But the work ethic is what's jumped off the screen to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, especially if you're talking about, if you're comparing me to Michael Jordan. There's no amount of work I could have put in that was going to make me. But when you're talking about, NBA greats or just NBA players in general, or, players at a certain professional level or at a high school level or whatever, when you're around other folks who are, in a similar talent bucket that you are, then absolutely that amount of work and effort and drive that you put into it makes a huge difference. And you can, in those clips, him working with his teammates and, a lot of his teammates that kind of didn't like him and
didn't have that kind of ethic.
Yeah, they didn't have the same drive that he had.
Yeah. You could almost see the respect level he had for, say, Steve Kerr, because Steve Kerr, now compared to me and you, Steve Kerr is a talented guy, but he was basically saying, I don't have the talent of most of these guys in this league, and so, but Jordan, he earned Jordan's respect early on, but the respect level between the two of them was so high. From what I've seen so far, part of it was because Jordan knew how hard he had to work to get to where he was.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot. I mean, I think you see that with some of his teammates, and you can kind of hear it with the ones he didn't necessarily have that same level. I mean, he's same level of respect for Rodman, right? I mean, there's this crazy stuff with Rodman, out and missing practices and skipping things. And I can't remember if it's in 9 or 10 where he misses the practice during the finals.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. So it was in 10.
It's but the level of respect, Jordan and Pippen, when they talk about Rodman, they're like, I mean, the guy, nobody worked harder than he did on the court, and he was a huge part of the team, and so you definitely see that level of respect really being afforded to guys who, not because they were super talented, but because they worked hard, right? I mean, he wasn't talking about, there's lots of talented folks out there that have made it to the NBA or have made it to whatever else they've done, but they haven't matched it with the level of work, and you sort of see those results.
But it's kind of like, and you've delivered a sermon or two, right?
I have.
Well, to me, good pastors tie in real life examples. I mean, using analogies and metaphors and all this stuff is what a good sermon is. You tie this thing, and you can tie that show in, I think, to any workplace. Because everybody, if you have a lot of people you work with, you have to that just show up and do their job, and they could be so much better at it if they had the right ethic.
It's probably so. You could tie it in a lot of those ways, but I think there's also.
I was going to ask you what counselors have been disappointing you, but I won't now. Maybe you saw that coming.
Everyone on the council works incredibly hard. No, but I think it's sometimes it's tough to translate too into a workplace or a social setting or some other sort of sort of area of life, because we're talking that's competitive basketball, and the only thing like Jordan says many times, the only thing he was concerned about was winning the trophy, right? Getting that ring at the end of the season. Whereas in your workplace or in government or in other areas of life, that the relational aspects of it, if there's not necessarily as clear of a goal, right? There's not a trophy, right?
One
You
of the
don't
things
necessarily know what is it that we're trying to win.
you may be onto something I wasn't planning on here, which is this is like a psychology session. It's like an old Bob Newhart episode. And the fact that let's talk politics,
Yeah.
which you're sort of in politics, but I don't consider you a politician.
Well, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Neither do I.
But the politicians who are not productive, maybe, are the ones who they do have a goal, and that's to get elected again.
Yeah.
Period. Or climb the ladder, and therefore they hurt themselves as far as the productivity and maybe their moral compass.
Yeah.
Because they do have a goal, and that's just to climb the ladder or get elected next time.
Yeah, and I think that's a piece of it in those kinds of settings in politics or in a workplace, right? Everybody has a different, lots of people might have different goals or different things that they care most about, right? That, whether it's getting reelected or, getting that corner office or reaching some level of, of salary.
Right.
And if that's what they're focused on and all of their decisions are based on that, that's not necessarily going to jive with someone who in a corporate setting, who's most concerned about serving their customers well, or is most concerned about, being liked at the office or, whatever it is. Because in sports, there is this much clearer, especially in professional sports or really at any level, there's this clearer common goal. Everybody you're playing with and everybody you're playing against is trying to reach the same podium, right? They're trying to hit the same goal. But that's not necessarily true in the rest of life. And that's one of the things, I think there's a ton of great lessons from playing sports, and I'm glad I did, and I want my kids to learn them too. And certainly work ethic is a big piece of that. But I think sometimes we take away this idea that it's a direct analogy in lots of, a more direct analogy than it should be, because there's not a clear who wins at the end of every other thing we do in our lives.
When you get off of the path, there's an episode there where Scottie Pippen got off the path and he wouldn't go back into the game because he wasn't going to take the final shot.
Yeah.
So therefore, his goal, apparently at that time, and I think he might admit it now, and the teammates would, well, his goal was not the same. It wasn't the trophy. It was, I want to win the trophy, but it's got to be me.
Yeah.
Because I'm the star.
And he sat out the whole first, half of that 98 season with an injury, but also, or he had surgery, right? But he also said,
had he timed his surgery?
Yeah, basically, I wasn't going to do surgery and rehab over the summer. They weren't paying me what they were supposed to be paying me, so I did it during the season. Which, and I think you hear that in some of especially that one instance where he wouldn't go back in the game because they didn't draw the play up for him. But yeah, there was this very clear, that was, and everybody recognized it as that is a sin in the sports world, right? When you put yourself above the team in a team sport like that.
That's why I think in many ways it does mirror that, because he got his eye off the target. Sure. So and let's go back to politics and you, because I said I don't consider you a politician, and I think with what's gone on the last few months, this has been totally different. But people, I don't know whether you'd agree or not. You can comment. But the decisions you have made have been what you viewed through research and studies and everything to be best for the community. It had nothing to do with whether you could be reelected or not. And in fact, there was somebody could argue that it would set you up not to be elected even. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so your decisions, I feel, sounds like I'm just giving a compliment, we're trying to figure out what the best thing to do is, as opposed to what the best thing to do to continue to get to be the mayor of Stillwater.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly been my focus, and that's whether we're talking about coronavirus or anything else at the city of Stillwater. I don't, I've gotten quite a few comments in the last few weeks with this stuff about how people, I can't wait to vote against you, or we're going to run you out of office and that sort of thing, and I sort of want to sit down with that person and explain to them how that's not really much of a threat.
Right.
And you sort of go, okay, so it's a volunteer job, and I don't really have any long-term political aspirations here. I'm not trying to use this as a springboard to run for some other office. If you don't like what I'm doing, then vote for somebody else. That's I'm not really that bothered by it, but I am going to do and make the decisions in my time in the position I'm in that I think are best for the community. And you're right. I mean, I don't. There's not been one time where I've thought, well, what's this going to mean in 2 years when I have to run for reelection, right? I mean, I don't. 2 years is so far away right now, given what we're dealing with.
Right. It's hard to even. We're just trying to get through this the best we can, and we will get through it.
We will.
We went into phase 2 on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I think I talked to you last. Was it just Monday?
I think it was Monday. Yeah.
Okay. How did the unrolling, if you will, the opening on Friday? I didn't notice any difference.
No. Yeah, we didn't. I haven't really heard much from anybody about issues or anything coming up with the rollout on Friday, and really it was a pretty small change. I mean, we bars opened back up under basically the same kind of restrictions that restaurants have. So I know, a lot of the bars in town were open this weekend. I haven't heard anything one way or the other about how, if there are any issues there. We allowed the sports fields to open up for practices over the next couple of weeks. So our SASA and Stillwater Soccer Club, I know, are running practices here over the next couple of weeks. We're not doing games.
Now, some communities are, right?
They are, yeah, absolutely. There's teams from Stillwater that I know are around different places in the state playing this weekend, but we've chosen to limit the amount of extra people we're bringing into those parks for now until we get to phase 3, and then we'll move that direction.
Let's talk about the local control thing, because obviously the governor has a different point of view than you do on this, as far as local control is part of the party platform. Actually, it seems to me like, if I've been paying attention, but it seems like that's only falls into place when we're talking about we don't want Washington to mess with us. What goes on at 23rd and Lincoln, a little different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on where you are by what you mean by local, right? I mean, local control is Oklahoma City versus Washington, or is it Stillwater versus Oklahoma City, or what? But yeah, I mean, and I don't know what the governor's role was in the bill that was put up on, I think it was Thursday, but the House did put up a bill to remove the local control portion of the Emergency Health Emergency Act. So it was a portion of the local control that we have, because we have authority in other places as well.
So that's why you can still control what goes on as far as sporting events when they open up completely.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, and that bill, it passed the House, but it did not pass the Senate. I mean, the Senate basically didn't even hear it before they adjourned. So it is not law. It did not take effect. But the House did vote in a fairly close vote to pass that bill, which was concerning. And it's concerning, one, because, I don't understand folks the majority of those who did vote for are Republicans and had, it is part of that, party's platform that they talk a lot about local control and small government. And I don't understand why they would want to consolidate more power in the governor's office and remove it from local communities where, as Scott was just talking a few minutes ago about the situation in Guyman that has 11,000 people and 600 cases, and the situation in Stillwater with 50,000 people and 22 cases, and the situation in Antlers with however many people, I mean, sometimes there's different things that you have to do, and there's different considerations you have to take in. So you should be able to keep that in mind. I think the more concerning thing about that, Steve, even more than the fact that they, and I haven't posted about this yet, but I'm formulating some thoughts. But that bill was a floor substitute amendment. That the Senate Bill 1102 was originally written submitted back at the beginning of the session as a criminal justice reform bill, and it's still sitting out there in the House because it hadn't gotten through anything yet, and so I think it had been passed by the Senate as a criminal justice reform bill and then gone to the House. Well, the House takes it, amends the bill entirely on Thursday morning, takes all the criminal justice stuff out, changes the title, changes the whole bill to this new local, changing the Health Emergency Act, and then debates and votes on the thing within the matter of 4 hours, and passes a bill that no one in the state has read, has seen, has been able to research, has any idea what the long-term effects of it are going to be. None of these House members that voted on it have done any research on what this is. This whole bill was written, I don't know when it was written, but it was certainly submitted to the membership and voted on in less than a half a day of time. with no indication. And the author was asked during debate, because I sat there and watched debate on the bill, was asked, have you talked to city, any mayors? Have you talked to city managers? Have you talked to city attorneys? Have you talked to the Oklahoma Municipal League? No, haven't reached out to any of them. No, they haven't reached out to me either. Well, you know what? None of us knew you were running the bill.
Right.
I mean, so what's so frustrating to me about that is, I think I've talked about this before. We have an open meetings law in the state of Oklahoma. In city council, that means we've got to publish an agenda at least 24 hours before a meeting. And it's got to list everything we're going to talk about and everything we're going to do. And if it's not on the agenda, we can't talk about it. We can't do anything with it, because we did not give you enough notice to know that that was going to be talked about, which is entirely reasonable. The state house is not subject to the open meeting law. So they can amend and pass a law in 4 hours that would have wide-ranging effects on cities and towns in the state of Oklahoma with zero notice to anybody. And I just find that appalling. It really, really makes me crazy.
I thought I could tell that you had been paying attention to it, because you put the votes up.
Yeah.
You posted them. And by the way, the two who are regulars on this show in the House,
Yep.
Both voted against it.
Well, Trish Ranson's the one who alerted me to it.
Oh, was it?
She sent me a
so
text
Trish was
and said, "Hey,
against
we're
it, and
talking
also
about
John
this."
Talley
Yep.
was a no. So,
and I appreciate that. And honestly, I think they should have been a no, whether they thought the bill was the right thing or not, just given the lack of notice and the lack of time anybody had to figure out, well, what does this actually mean? How does this change things? There was a whole section in there about how the voting was going to have to. There was a voting section in there for elections during a health emergency. And we're going, have you talked to the election board? Have you had any? I mean, it's crazy to me that the legislature is allowed to do that kind of thing, where they can just throw some language out there and vote on a bill without notice, without input. And I'm very happy that the Senate let it die.
there you go. Hey, we'll take a time out. We'll dive into what's going on tonight at the.
Okay.
You have a big council meeting here,
We do.
and you probably have a job to do today too,
I do.
right? So, hey, we'll take a time out. We're in with the mayor. Will Joyce is on it.